The moment you learn how to enter this state, you are already rich beyond measure. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. Wealth is not counted in coins or possessions. It is counted in states of consciousness. Everything you long for already exists, waiting for you to clothe yourself in the right state of being. When I say state, I mean the inner atmosphere you carry, the assumption you dare to occupy. The poor man remains poor not because opportunities are absent, but because he continues to live in the state of lack. The rich man is rich because he inwardly assumes wealth as natural, inevitable, and true. The outer world simply echoes the inner claim. Imagination is the door. Feeling is the key. You cannot stand at the threshold begging for change. You must boldly step into the house and live as though it were already yours. When you assume the state of wealth, of abundance, of freedom, life bends itself to reflect your conviction. This is not wishful thinking, it is divine law. Tonight, close your eyes and see yourself already possessing what you desire. Do not hope, no. Do not wait, assume. Make the feeling of wealth so real that the world cannot deny it. Your job is not to figure out how it will come. Your only task is to remain faithful to the state until the unseen becomes seen. So I say to you, learn the art of entering the state. Dare to dwell in it. Live in the end. For the moment you master this, you are not becoming rich, you are rich. Wealth begins in consciousness, not in possessions. For possessions are only the shadow cast by an inner state. The true foundation of abundance lies in the unseen realm of thought and imagination, where every form of prosperity is first conceived. A man may gather riches yet remain poor if his consciousness is filled with fear, doubt, and limitation. Conversely, one who assumes the feeling of wealth, security, and freedom will inevitably draw to himself all that reflects those convictions. The world responds to the inner claim, and lasting riches flow from the consciousness that dares to accept abundance as natural. State is the inner assumption you occupy, the invisible atmosphere that surrounds your being and colors every thought, word, and action. It is not something outside of you, but the very condition of consciousness you accept as your truth. When you live in a state of lack, you naturally interpret the world through limitation, seeing obstacles where opportunities could be. When you live in a state of abundance, life presents itself with ease, grace, and overflowing supply. The state you occupy shapes the quality of your experiences because the outer world mirrors the inner conviction. Each state carries its own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and once entered, it influences every part of your life. You cannot dwell in a state of weakness and expect strength, nor live in a state of doubt and expect faith to guide you. To change your life, you must deliberately shift the state you inhabit, not by force, but by imagination and feeling. By assuming the inner atmosphere of the desired outcome, you invite reality to align with it, for states are living energies, and the one you choose to occupy becomes the stage upon which your life inevitably plays. Poverty and wealth are states of mind, not external facts, for what the world calls rich or poor is merely the outpicturing of an inner assumption. A man may possess millions, yet live in fear of losing it, and in that fear he dwells in poverty though his bank account overflows. Another may have little by the world's measure, yet he carries within himself a consciousness of abundance, feeling secure, free, and provided for, and in time his outer life must reflect that inner wealth. Everything begins with the state you accept as real. To persist in thoughts of lack, to dwell on what is missing, is to anchor yourself in the state of poverty. And from that state, only circumstances of limitation can flow. The law is impersonal. It gives to each man according to the consciousness he entertains. Wealth is not gathered by striving alone, it is drawn by the magnetic power of assumption. When you boldly claim within yourself that you are wealthy, secure, and prosperous, and feel it to be natural, you align with the state of wealth, and life responds accordingly. Nothing external defines your reality until it is first accepted internally. The world is a mirror faithfully reflecting the state you occupy, and when you shift your inner awareness, the outer facts must change to correspond. Imagination opens the door to any reality, because it is the creative power that shapes and molds the unseen into the seen. Everything man has ever accomplished, every structure built, Every discovery made, every work of art brought to life, began first as an image held in the imagination. It is not a child's fantasy or idle daydreaming, but the very workshop of creation, the place where the invisible becomes tangible. The world you experience is nothing more than imagination objectified, for every event, circumstance, and condition arises from a seed once planted within consciousness. When you dare to imagine a state and clothe yourself in the feeling of its reality, you open the door to that very experience. Imagination does not wait for facts to confirm. It precedes facts and compels them to align. To see yourself healthy, free, prosperous, and fulfilled in imagination is to prepare the way for life to reflect those assumptions. The law of consciousness is unchanging. What you imagine with feeling and persist in must harden into fact. The outer world is pliable, fluid, and ever responsive to the inner images you entertain. Too often man uses imagination destructively, rehearsing failure, fear, and limitation, and then wonders why life reflects such conditions. Yet the same power that creates struggle can be turned toward abundance and joy, for imagination is neutral, waiting only for direction. The key is discipline of thought and persistence in vision. By daily entering into the scene of your fulfilled desire, by living in the end in imagination, you claim your reality before it appears. Imagination is the doorway because it allows you to step beyond appearances and occupy the state of your choice. It is the divine gift placed within every man, the secret bridge between what is and what can be, and through it, all realities are possible. Feeling is the secret key that makes assumptions real, because it is the vital energy that breathes life into imagination. An assumption without feeling remains a lifeless thought, a picture without substance, but once it is infused with emotion, it becomes a living reality within consciousness and begins to set in motion the unseen forces that shape experience. The universe does not respond to empty words or idle wishes. It responds to the deep impressions made upon the subconscious mind, and those impressions are created and sealed through feeling. When you assume a state and feel it to be true, even in the absence of external proof, you are planting the seed of manifestation. The subconscious, which governs the unfolding of your reality, accepts what is felt as real and unquestioningly brings it forth. This is why it is said that feeling is the secret, for it is not enough to merely think about wealth, health, or love. You must feel the joy of possessing it, the freedom of experiencing it, the naturalness of it being already yours. Feeling anchors the assumption into your being and makes it part of your identity. Consider the man who repeats affirmations of success yet still carries the inner feeling of failure. His words are powerless because they are contradicted by the vibration of his emotions. But the one who may speak little yet inwardly feels prosperous and secure will find circumstances aligning to confirm that inner conviction. Feeling is the magnetic current that draws corresponding experiences into your life, and without it, assumption cannot bear fruit. To master this key, you must learn to generate within yourself the emotions of the fulfilled desire. Close your eyes and enter the scene of your wish accomplished. Allow the tones, the sights, the sounds of that reality to impress you, but most importantly, summon the feelings you would naturally have if it were already true. The thrill of joy, the relief of freedom, the quiet certainty of accomplishment. These are the states that seal the assumption. The longer and more faithfully you dwell in them, the more unshakable your conviction becomes, until what was once imagined feels inevitable. Feeling is not effort but surrender, for it is not about forcing an outcome, but accepting the inner experience as real. The law is simple: what you feel deeply and persistently, you will experience outwardly. By mastering feeling, you unlock the true secret of creation, for it is the silent language by which the subconscious is instructed and the bridge by which imagination becomes reality. The world mirrors your inner conviction, because life has no choice but to reflect the assumptions you hold as true about yourself and about reality. Every experience that comes to you is not random or accidental, but a perfect outpicturing of the state you consistently dwell in. Your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings form the conviction that radiates outward, and the outer world obediently takes its shape according to the image within. Just as a mirror cannot display a reflection different from what stands before it, so too the world cannot present to you conditions other than those that echo your inner state. If a man is convinced that life is a struggle, he will continually find evidence to prove it. He may move to a new city, change careers, or surround himself with different people. Yet the same hardships will follow him, because he carries the conviction of struggle wherever he goes. Another man, convinced of his worthiness, abundance, and success, will encounter doors opening, opportunities arising, and people aligning to support him, for his inner certainty draws forth experiences that confirm it. The difference lies not in external circumstances, but in the conviction each holds within. This truth reveals why mere wishing and hoping often fail to bring about transformation. A man may wish to be rich while still secretly convinced of his unworthiness or his lack. That hidden conviction outweighs the wish, for the subconscious responds to what is deeply believed, not what is lightly desired. To change the reflection, one must first change the conviction. By assuming a new state, by impressing the subconscious with the feeling of already being what you long to be, you shift the conviction that governs your world. The outer reality, having no will of its own, must then conform to the new belief you embody. Conviction is not formed by surface thought alone, but by repeated inner acceptance until it becomes natural. The more faithfully you dwell in the assumption of your desired state, the stronger your conviction grows. At first it may feel like imagination or pretense, but as you persist, it becomes the very atmosphere you breathe, the unseen certainty that shapes your every action. In time, the world begins to mirror this conviction so perfectly that you may forget it ever came from within, for the reflection appears as solid fact. This is why it is said that life does not happen to you, but through you. The events and circumstances that seem to come from outside are nothing but projections of the inner world you carry. When you take responsibility for your convictions, you take control of your reality. No longer do you blame others, conditions, or fate, for you recognize the source of your experience lies in consciousness. By choosing deliberately the conviction you wish to embody, and by sustaining it through feeling and imagination, you create the world anew. The law is unchanging as within, so without. The world mirrors your inner conviction with absolute fidelity, and the only way to alter the reflection is to alter the belief you hold about yourself. When you dare to assume the conviction of abundance, freedom, love, and success, and persist until it feels natural, the mirror of life will reveal nothing less than that truth. Do not hope for change, assume the change. For hope keeps your desire always at a distance, while assumption brings it into the present moment as though it were already fulfilled. Hope is a longing that admits lack, a subtle confession that what you desire is not yet yours, and in clinging to it you unconsciously hold the very condition you wish to escape. Assumption, on the other hand, is bold possession. It is the inner act of claiming your desire as a present reality and living from that conviction until the outer world bends to mirror it. Every transformation begins not with waiting but with acceptance. The man who hopes for wealth remains poor in his feeling, for his hope says, "I do not yet have." But the man who assumes wealth wears it inwardly, walks in its atmosphere, and acts as though it were the most natural state of being. Life, having no will apart from your inner world, simply reflects back the certainty you carry. The law is unfailing. You do not manifest what you wish for. You manifest what you assume to be true. Hope often disguises itself as faith, yet they are worlds apart. Faith is assumption sustained by feeling. It is the conviction that the unseen is already fact. Hope looks forward, expecting something to happen. But assumption looks inward, knowing it already has. To dwell in hope is to perpetually wait, to keep the desire always on the horizon. To dwell in assumption is to shift into the end, to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled, and to rest in the knowing that reality must conform. When you assume the change, you engage imagination as the creative force it truly is. Imagination is not idle fantasy, but the workshop of reality. By picturing yourself in the condition desired and clothing it with the corresponding feeling, you send a clear command to the subconscious, which orchestrates circumstances to make it so. This is why Neville taught to live in the end, For to imagine the end is to bypass the struggle of the middle. If you can feel now what you would feel then, you are already there in consciousness, and what begins in consciousness must eventually appear in fact. Consider the difference between two men desiring success. One hopes, speaking endlessly of what he wishes could be, waiting for a sign, postponing his joy until results appear. The other assumes, inwardly convinced of his success, already tasting the satisfaction of accomplishment, already living in the feeling of achievement. The first remains stuck in waiting, the second moves in harmony with his assumption, and life reflects it back with opportunities, recognition, and progress. Both use the same law, but only one applies it consciously. To practice assumption requires discipline of thought and feeling. It is not about forcing results through effort, but about remaining faithful to the inner state regardless of appearances. The outer world may still display lack for a time, but if within you the change is already accepted, the outer must eventually conform. The mirror cannot resist the image you hold. Each time doubt arises, return again to the end, feel the satisfaction of fulfillment, and let that conviction steady you. With persistence, assumption hardens into fact. Do not wait for conditions to give you permission to believe. The outer follows the inner, never the other way around. If you assume the change now, health, abundance, freedom, love, you invite the world to reorganize itself around that conviction. By daring to claim the state in advance, you live as the creator rather than the beggar of life. Hope will keep you yearning, but assumption will set you free. For the moment you embody the change inwardly, it is already yours. Faithful dwelling in the desired state guarantees manifestation, because consciousness is the only reality, and the state you consistently occupy must inevitably externalize itself in the world of facts. To dwell faithfully means to remain inwardly anchored in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, to return again and again to the inner atmosphere of your desire until it becomes more natural to you than the old state you seek to transcend. It is not a fleeting imagination or an occasional exercise, but a steady habitation of mind and heart, a choice to persist in the unseen until it becomes seen. The law of assumption is precise and impartial. What you assume and sustain with feeling will, in its own appointed time, crystallize into form. Many begin the journey of imagination with enthusiasm, but abandon it when results do not appear immediately, forgetting that manifestation is not measured by speed, but by faithfulness. Just as a seed requires nurturing before it breaks through the soil, so too does the seed of assumption require faithful dwelling before it reveals itself outwardly. Impatience is the enemy of manifestation, for it tempts you to abandon the inner state and return to the old conviction of lack. Faithful dwelling dissolves impatience because it rests in the certainty that what is accepted within must appear without. Every state of consciousness has its own atmosphere, its own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. When you dwell in the state of wealth, you begin to think as one who is wealthy, feel the security of abundance, and act in ways consistent with prosperity. When you dwell in the state of love, you carry the joy, warmth, and confidence of being cherished, and life arranges itself to reflect that reality. The outer world does not create these feelings. It only mirrors them back to you once you have faithfully assumed them within. To change states is to change worlds, and to dwell faithfully is to guarantee that the world you choose inwardly will soon surround you outwardly. Faithfulness requires imagination and feeling working together. Imagination provides the scene, the picture of the end accomplished. Feeling supplies the conviction, the emotional acceptance that it is already so. Each time you enter this combination, you are impressing the subconscious mind, which is the creative power of your world. The subconscious does not argue or question. It simply receives the impression and sets about arranging events to bring it forth. By dwelling faithfully, you impress the subconscious repeatedly until the new state becomes the dominant conviction, and then manifestation is inevitable. The mistake many make is to test the law half-heartedly, to dwell briefly in the desired state and then quickly return to the old state when no immediate change is visible. This is like planting a seed and digging it up each day to see if it has sprouted. Faithfulness means allowing the unseen process to unfold without interference. You remain in the end, regardless of appearances, because you know appearances are but shadows of the past state, soon to be replaced by the reflection of the new assumption. To cultivate faithful dwelling, discipline is required. You must guard against thoughts and feelings that contradict your chosen state. This does not mean resisting them with fear, but gently turning again to the desired feeling whenever doubt arises. Each return strengthens your conviction, and over time, the new state becomes your natural dwelling place. Persistence is the secret ingredient, for no assumption held faithfully can fail to manifest. Consider the example of a man desiring healing. If he faithfully dwells in the state of being whole, feeling the relief, the vitality, the freedom of perfect health, his body must eventually conform to that assumption. Or a woman desiring success in her career. By faithfully dwelling in the state of accomplishment, she begins to carry herself with confidence, to think from success, to feel the joy of achievement, and circumstances align to confirm her conviction. The outer world is compelled to rearrange itself when the inner state is consistently held. Faithful dwelling is not forced effort, but relaxed certainty. It is the quiet knowing that what you have assumed within is already yours. You no longer beg, strive, or wonder how it will come. You simply live in the end, enjoying in imagination what must soon appear. This inner relaxation is the true mark of faith, for you cannot dwell faithfully if you are restless with doubt. Rest in the state as though it were already fact, and you guarantee its manifestation. The law cannot fail, for it is rooted in the nature of consciousness itself. As within, so without. The state you faithfully inhabit becomes your world. To dwell faithfully in the desired state is to plant the seed, nurture it, and rest in the certainty of harvest. The outer manifestation is but the inevitable echo of your inner faithfulness, the shadow cast by the conviction you refuse to abandon. The how is never your concern. Faith handles it, because the unfolding of your desire belongs to the unseen intelligence of life, not to your reasoning mind. The greatest burden you can place upon yourself is to figure out the mechanics of manifestation, to analyze step by step how circumstances might arrange themselves to bring your dream into form. In doing so, you limit the infinite possibilities available to you and bind yourself to the narrow vision of human logic. Faith, however, operates on a higher level, seeing the end as accomplished and leaving the means to the creative power that governs all. Your task is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The task of faith is to orchestrate the invisible chain of events that leads from assumption to manifestation. When you insist upon knowing how, you reveal doubt in the law. The very question of how implies that you do not yet trust the reality of the state assumed, and so you attempt to control the process by force. Yet life has proven again and again that outcomes often arrive through channels you could never predict, in ways far beyond your limited foresight. The moment you release the burden of how and rest in the conviction that it is already done, you open yourself to infinite avenues of expression. Faith delights in surprise. It operates through coincidences, synchronicities, and sudden shifts that logic could never design. To live by faith is to surrender the middle and focus solely on the end. You are not required to design the steps by which your desire is fulfilled. You are required only to dwell in the joy and relief of its accomplishment. Imagine yourself already in possession of the desired state. Feel the naturalness of it being true now. Carry that conviction as though no question remained. Faith then handles the unseen orchestration, weaving together circumstances, people, and opportunities in a way that brings your assumption to life. Just as you trust the soil to bring forth a harvest once you plant the seed, so must you trust faith to bring forth the manifestation once you have assumed it within. Think of a farmer who plants grain. He does not dig up the soil each day demanding to know how the seed is breaking open, how the roots are forming, how the stalk will grow. He rests in faith, knowing the process is sure. In the same way, you must plant your desire in imagination, water it with feeling, and rest in the certainty of harvest. The soil of the subconscious knows exactly how to bring forth the fruit. Your only work is to plant faithfully and trust the process. To concern yourself with how is to disturb the soil, to weaken the growth, and to delay the harvest. Faith operates with precision because it aligns you with the greater intelligence that governs all life. This intelligence does not need your interference. It requires only your cooperation through assumption. When you ask how, you are trying to replace faith with control. But control belongs to appearances, while faith belongs to creation. Control looks at the visible and tries to manipulate it. Faith looks at the invisible and knows it is already real. Control struggles, resists and worries. Faith rests, trusts and allows. The one who lives in faith lives in freedom, for he no longer needs to micromanage the universe. He knows the universe responds faithfully to the state he occupies. The world itself testifies to this law. Reflect on the many times in your life when desires were fulfilled in ways you never could have arranged yourself. Opportunities seemed to fall into your lap. Doors opened at the perfect moment. People entered your path at just the right time. These were not accidents. They were the natural outpicturing of the faith you carried, whether conscious or unconscious. If this can happen without deliberate use of the law, how much more certain is the outcome when you consciously assume the desired state and release the burden of how? To dwell on the how is to live in anxiety, but to live in faith is to dwell in peace. Anxiety says, I must figure it out or it will not happen. Faith says, it is already done, and life is arranging it. Anxiety struggles against the current, wearing itself out in effort. Faith flows with the current, knowing the river of life carries it surely to its destination. When you stop interfering and simply live in the end, you free the creative power to operate without obstruction. Practical application of this principle is simple yet profound. Each day, take time to imagine yourself in the end state of your desire. Do not concern yourself with details of how you arrive there. If you desire wealth, imagine the feeling of financial freedom, of paying bills with ease, of generosity toward others. If you desire health, imagine the freedom of movement, the joy of vitality, the gratitude of wholeness. If you desire love, imagine the warmth of companionship, the laughter of shared moments, the comfort of being cherished. Do not ask how these scenes will come to pass. Simply feel them as true and rest in that conviction. The more faithfully you dwell in the end, the more surely faith handles the unseen means. Every great teacher of truth has spoken this principle. Walk by faith, not by sight. Take no thought for tomorrow. Believe that you have received it, and it shall be yours. These are not poetic phrases but practical instructions. They point to the same eternal law. Your responsibility is assumption. Faith's responsibility is manifestation. The moment you truly accept the end within, the means begin to align outside. And though you may not see them at first, they are moving with certainty toward the visible result. The how is never your concern because the how belongs to the infinite. You are not asked to carry the weight of orchestrating the universe. You are asked only to believe, to assume, to feel the reality of your desire now. Faith does the work you cannot see. Faith moves the pieces you could not imagine. Faith opens doors you never knew existed. Faith makes the impossible inevitable. To worry about how is to limit the infinite, but to trust faith is to allow the infinite to reveal its perfect way. The moment you enter the state of wealth, you are already rich. For wealth is not a matter of possessions, figures, or circumstances, but a state of consciousness that precedes all outer forms. To enter the state is to shift the very foundation of your being, to clothe yourself inwardly with the feeling of abundance until it becomes your natural atmosphere. You need not wait for evidence in the bank or recognition from the world to confirm it, for the law is clear as within, so without. The riches of life are born first in imagination and feeling, and the moment you assume them as real within, you set in motion the forces that guarantee their outer expression. Wealth is not created in the world of facts but in the unseen realm of consciousness. What the world calls wealth, money, property, influence, opportunity, is only the shadow cast by an inner conviction. A man convinced of poverty will continue to find lack no matter how many opportunities surround him because he interprets life through the lens of insufficiency. Another, convinced of abundance, will prosper even in conditions that appear barren because his state of wealth reorganizes the outer world to reflect his conviction. The difference is not in external resources, but in the state each chooses to inhabit. The state of wealth has its own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. When you occupy it, you naturally think in terms of expansion, possibility, and generosity. You no longer shrink with fear of loss or cling tightly in anxiety, for the conviction of abundance frees you to act boldly and to trust the unseen supply. This shift of consciousness alters everything, for you cannot dwell in wealth and continue to behave as one in lack. Your speech, your manner, your decisions all begin to align with the inner assumption, and life mirrors back the reflection with corresponding circumstances. To enter the state of wealth requires imagination, for imagination is the doorway into every possible reality. You must dare to see yourself already in possession of what you desire, to construct within your mind the scenes that would naturally follow the fulfillment of your wish. If you were wealthy today, what would you feel? How would you move? What would you say to yourself as you lay down to sleep? By rehearsing these scenes in imagination and saturating them with genuine feeling, you step into the state of wealth even before the world acknowledges it. Imagination, clothed with emotion, impresses the subconscious mind, and once impressed, the subconscious must externalize it. The great error most people make is waiting for outer change before allowing themselves to feel inwardly changed. They cling to appearances, saying, "I will feel wealthy when I see money in my hands," not realizing that such a stance binds them forever to lack. For appearances are only effects, and effects cannot alter causes. It is only by reversing the order, by feeling wealthy first, that the outer facts must conform. The moment you dare to assume wealth, the cause is planted, and the effect must follow in its appointed time. Faith is the anchor that sustains you in this process. To enter the state of wealth and remain there requires that you trust the law of assumption more than the testimony of your senses. Appearances may still show lack for a season, but faith knows appearances are but the remnants of old states already passing away. To remain faithful to the new assumption is to guarantee its manifestation, for no state held consistently within can fail to externalize without. Faith is the refusal to waver, the quiet certainty that what is accepted within must be seen without. Wealth, when understood as a state, reveals itself to be more than money alone. It is a fullness of being, a sense of security, freedom, an overflowing supply that touches every area of life. To enter this state is to expand into generosity, to feel the richness of relationships, opportunities, creativity, and peace. Money may be one of its expressions, but it is never the essence, for the essence lies in consciousness. The truly wealthy man is one who lives in the conviction that life is abundant, and that he himself is the source of that abundance. The practical application of this truth is both simple and profound. Each day, take time to withdraw from the world of appearances and enter into imagination. See yourself already enjoying the freedom wealth provides. Hear the conversations you would have, feel the relief and gratitude you would naturally experience, and dwell in that state until it becomes more real to you than the evidence of lack. Throughout the day, carry the atmosphere of wealth with you. When doubt arises, gently return to the inner conviction, reminding yourself that the outer world is only a mirror and must eventually reflect the state you sustain. To persist in this practice is to gradually recondition the subconscious mind, which governs the patterns of your life. The subconscious accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling, and once a new belief is planted, it expresses itself effortlessly through action and circumstance. By faithfully entering the state of wealth, you are not forcing results, but aligning with a law that guarantees manifestation. Life itself becomes your servant, rearranging events, opening doors, and bringing forth the supply that corresponds to your inner conviction. The moment you enter the state of wealth, you are already rich because reality exists first in consciousness. Just as a seed planted in soil is already a tree in potential, your assumption of wealth is already wealth in essence. To doubt it because it is not yet visible is to deny the law of growth. But to rest in the certainty of the state is to allow the process to unfold naturally, until what was once unseen becomes undeniable fact. You need not strive, beg, or struggle, for the law works effortlessly once set in motion. Your only task is to assume and to remain faithful. Every state is available to you, for consciousness is infinite, and wealth is no exception. The only barrier is the refusal to assume it. The world may try to convince you of limitation, pointing to appearances of lack, but the inner man is free to choose any state he desires. When you understand this freedom, you realize that wealth is not something to be earned or chased, but something to be accepted. By entering the state, you claim it as your own, and by persisting, you guarantee its outward expression. The world in time must conform to your assumption. Circumstances will arise, opportunities will appear, and resources will flow, not because you forced them, but because you faithfully entered the state of wealth. Life is nothing but imagination objectified, and imagination directed with feeling is creation itself. The moment you enter the state of wealth, you are rich in truth, and the outer world, being only a mirror, has no choice but to reflect the abundance you already carry within.